The dry wind rolled across the plains like a restless spirit, brushing against the tall grass and carrying the faint smell of dust and pine. It was the kind of morning when the sun had only just begun to rise over the far ridge, painting the sky in soft gold and stretching long shadows across the earth. Everything felt quiet, almost too still, as if the land itself was holding its breath. That was when the woman's voice cut through the calm air and startled a hawk from a nearby branch. "Oh, that hurts," she yelled, clutching her arm as she stumbled back from the wagon wheel she had been trying to lift. Her voice echoed across the open land, sharp enough to turn the heads of the few horses tied nearby. She had been traveling since dawn, determined to fix the broken axle and get moving again before the day grew hotter, but the wood had snapped in her hand and sent a sharp sting across her palm. She hissed softly and tried to steady her breathing while shaking her hand to ease the pain. She did not expect anyone to hear it, let alone anyone to come close. She traveled alone often and was used to wide spaces and silent land. So when a shadow fell across the dirt near her feet, she turned quickly. Her heart jumping a little, a tall Apache man stood a few steps away, his posture stiff and unsure, as if he was not quite certain he should be there. He was young, maybe only a little older than she was, and he kept his shoulders slightly hunched, like he wished he could fold himself smaller. His dark hair hung to his shoulders, tied loosely with a strip of leather, and the soft morning light showed the warm tone of his skin. He held a small bundle of herbs and cloth in his hands, and his eyes stayed down. Avoiding hers entirely, she wasn't sure how long he had been standing there, or how quietly he had come through the trees, but she felt her breath catch for a moment. She had seen Apache men before, though never this close and never one who looked so uneasy. Most men she met on the road walked with their heads high and their steps loud and sure. But this one looked as if he wished the ground would open and swallow him. "Are you all right?" he asked, though his voice was so soft she almost didn't hear it. He still refused to look at her, his eyes on the dirt and his fingers tightening around the herbs. She struggled to read him. His tone wasn't threatening. If anything, he sounded more nervous than she was. "I just scraped my hand on the wood," she responded, lifting her palm slightly to show him the thin line of bright red. It stung, but it wasn't serious. She expected him to nod and walk away. Instead, he shifted from one foot to the other, almost like a shy kid trying to decide whether to stay or leave. She saw him swallow hard. "I can help," he said. The words came out uneven, as if he wasn't used to offering. Or maybe he wasn't used to speaking to a stranger, especially a woman traveling alone. She hesitated for a second. Not because she feared him. Something about him felt gentle, as if he carried more caution than danger. But she didn't know what he intended with the herbs or why he seemed so troubled. Still, the pain in her hand pulsed, and she was in the middle of nowhere with a broken wagon and no help nearby. A little help wouldn't hurt. "All right," she said slowly, stepping a little closer. "What is that in your hand?" His cheeks warmed a shade, and he lifted the bundle slightly. "Medicine," he said. "For cuts. My grandmother taught me." His voice softened even more, almost too low to catch. He was clearly shy, almost painfully so. She had met many people in her travels across the old American plains, but she had never seen a man who seemed so strong on the outside, yet so unsure inside. He reached for her hand, but stopped halfway, freezing completely. His dark eyes flicked upward for a brief second before dropping again. "May I?" he asked quietly. "You can," she said, and held her hand out. His fingers trembled as he took her hand in his own. They were warm, rough from work, but gentle. He tried to focus on the cut, pressing a small leaf against it, but the moment his thumb brushed her skin, she let out an involuntary sound of pain. "Oh, that hurts," she blurted again. The Apache man jerked like he had been struck. His face turned bright red, full of embarrassment, and he quickly let go of her hand as if he had done something terribly wrong. He stepped back, almost tripping over his own heel, and held the herbs to his chest. "I am sorry," he said in a rush. "I pressed too hard. I did not mean to." His voice cracked slightly, and he lowered his head again. His long hair slid forward, hiding his expression. He looked ready to run. She blinked at him, surprised by how flustered he was. "It doesn't hurt that much," she said softly. You're all right. You just startled me, but he didn't look convinced. His breathing had become uneven, and he kept wiping his palms against his sides as though they were suddenly too warm. His shyness made him seem younger, almost innocent, and she found herself wanting to ease his worry. You can try again, she offered. He shook his head at first, but after a moment, he stepped back toward her, slower this time. He gently took her hand again, his fingers barely touching her skin, as if he feared he might bruise her with the slightest pressure. This time he worked with care, placing the herbs lightly and wrapping the cloth around her palm. The wind shifted, brushing against them, and for a moment the world felt strangely still. She noticed how tense his shoulders were, how he struggled to breathe evenly, how he looked everywhere except her eyes. She wondered what kind of life he came from to make him so unsure around someone he was helping. When he finished, he stepped back again, hands falling awkwardly at his sides. He looked like he wanted to speak, but didn't know how to form the words. "Thank you," she said with a warm tone. He nodded once, brief and quick. "You are welcome." Then he turned slightly, looking toward the trees as if preparing to disappear into the shadows again. His posture said he had already decided to leave, maybe believing he had already overstayed, but before he could take his first step, something rustled sharply in the brush behind her. Her heart thudded. It wasn't the soft movement of small wildlife. It was heavier, louder, closer. The Apache man lifted his head, his entire body stiffening. His eyes, once lowered, now locked sharply on the trees behind her. The shy tremble disappeared from his hands. His chest rose with a deeper breath, steady and alert. He whispered a single warning. "Don't turn around." The tone of his voice was nothing like before. It held strength, caution, and something sharper, something that made chills rise across her arms. She froze. Her breath caught mid-air, her bandaged hand still pressed against her chest. She didn't know what was behind her or why he had suddenly changed, but she could feel danger growing in the air like a storm rolling in. He stepped forward slowly, placing himself between her and the trees, and before she could ask another question, something moved again in the brush. Faster this time, the Apache man reached for something at his belt. The leaves trembled, and she felt the land hold its breath once more. Waiting for what stepped out next. She stood completely still, afraid to breathe too loudly. The Apache man's back was now facing her, his shoulders squared in a way that looked nothing like the shy figure who had blushed over touching her hand only moments before. It was as if he had slipped into another layer of himself, one built by long years of learning the land and reading danger in the smallest sounds. The shift made her realize she knew nothing about him. She didn't even know his name. All she knew was that he had heard something in those trees, that she could not see, and that he had placed himself between her and the unknown without a second thought. The brush behind them rustled again, and she flinched, feeling her heartbeat pressing hard against her ribs. She wanted to turn her head just enough to look, but his earlier warning stayed in her mind. She stared at his back instead. His long dark hair moved with the wind, and she could see the tension in the muscles across his shoulders. His hand had settled near a small knife tied to his belt, his fingers curled but not yet gripping it fully. He was listening closely, even lowering his stance a little, ready for whatever stepped out. The land stayed quiet for a long moment, except for the soft push of the breeze and the distant call of a crow. It should have felt peaceful, but the silence felt heavy. Too heavy. As if everything around them was waiting. Then a deer burst out from the brush, leaping into the clearing with a fast, frightened grace. It bounded past them and disappeared across the plains. She let out the breath she had been holding, but the Apache man didn't relax right away. He kept his eyes on the trees, studying the shadows with a level of focus that made her uneasy. "That wasn't what I heard," he finally murmured, lowering his hand but not his guard. Her stomach tightened again. If the deer wasn't what startled him, then something else was still out there. Something close. Something watching. He stepped back toward her, keeping his eyes on the trees. His voice dropped even lower. "How long has your wagon been stuck here?" "Since sunrise," she whispered. "The wheel cracked last night, and I tried to fix it this morning. There were no tracks nearby when I woke up." He gave a single nod, still searching the trees. "Someone has been watching you for a while." Longer than I was, the skin on the back of her neck prickled. She had slept beside the wagon under a sky full of quiet stars, thinking she was alone on the open plains. The idea that someone may have been near her in the dark made her chest tighten. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" she asked. He finally looked at her, and for a moment she saw the same shy uncertainty from earlier in his eyes. "I did not want to frighten you. I wanted to be sure." "And I was not sure until now." She watched him more carefully. His gentle nature was still there beneath the worry, but now she understood there was more to him than shyness. There was skill, caution, and a quiet instinct shaped by the land. He had probably grown up reading every detail the wind carried, learning when to fear it and when to trust it. She glanced at the wagon. "Do you think whoever it is wants something from me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he crouched near the dirt and brushed his fingertips across the ground. She stepped closer to see what he was looking at. The soil was soft with morning dew, but a faint mark cut through it, a footprint, fresh, but it wasn't his. Her breath caught. "That wasn't there earlier." He shook his head. "No, whoever it is came closer while we were talking." She closed her eyes for a moment, trying to calm her racing thoughts. She had traveled for years across the old American roads, through mountain passes and open fields, and she had met all kinds of people, traders, hunters, families searching for new land, even bandits once. But never had she felt watched like this. Not silently. Not from the shadows. "What do we do?" she asked. He rose to his full height, and though his face still carried the same gentle softness, his voice had steadied. "We wait. If they wanted to harm you, they would have come out already. They are watching to see if you are alone." She folded her arms around herself and glanced around the clearing again. "I usually am alone," she admitted. "I do not travel with anyone, and I have no one back home waiting for me. Just my wagon and the supplies inside it." He studied her a bit longer. His eyes, though shy before, now looked sharper, curious. "You travel alone across these lands?" She nodded. "I have been doing it for years. My parents passed a long time ago. Home never felt like a place. More like a memory. So I keep moving." Something in his expression softened at her words, almost like he understood more than she expected him to. "My people believe the land remembers every footstep. The places we leave behind always carry a small part of us. You must leave many pieces of yourself across the plains." She gave a small smile. Maybe the land is taking care of me. Who knows?" A faint warmth touched his face again at her smile, but the shyness didn't last. The sound in the brush had made him too alert to relax. He kept glancing toward the trees as if expecting something to emerge at any moment. He spoke again, quieter this time. "You should know something. When I came here, I was not following your voice. I was following the horse tracks. They were not yours." Her breath caught. "Someone else was already near your wagon before I stepped out of the trees." The air around her seemed to thin. She didn't know what scared her more. The idea that someone was hiding nearby now, or the idea that they had been close to her while she slept last night. "Do you think they took something?" she asked, her voice shaky. He stepped toward her wagon and lifted the edge of the canvas cover. She followed behind him nervously. He looked inside carefully, his sharp eyes checking every crate and bundle. "Nothing seems disturbed?" "But that does not mean they were not close." She stared at the empty spaces between the crates, imagining someone crouched there in the dark while she slept a few feet away. A chill traveled through her arms. "Why would anyone watch me?" she whispered. He let the cover fall back down. "Sometimes people watch for the wrong reasons. Sometimes for the right ones. Until we see their face, we cannot know." She stepped closer to him without realizing it. His presence made her feel grounded, safer, even though she hardly knew him. Something about his steady voice and careful movements felt trustworthy. She had met many people on her travels, but none who stepped between her and danger so quickly. "You said someone followed the tracks here," she murmured. "Do you think they're still around?" He nodded. "Yes, I can feel it. The land feels strange when someone watches. The birds grow quiet. The air feels heavier. It is like the plains are warning us." The wind picked up again, stronger this time. The trees swayed and the soft brush of leaves whispered across the clearing. She could feel the tension in the air. Just as he described it, he took another slow breath and stepped slightly in front of her again. I need you to stay close to me. Whoever is out there might be waiting for a moment when you step too far from the wagon. Why me? She asked. His jaw tightened. Because you are alone. And because some people prey on those who stand alone in wide places? She felt a shiver climb her spine. She wrapped her arms around herself and kept her eyes on the shifting tree line. The morning no longer felt warm or quiet. It felt uncertain. He walked around the wagon slowly, checking the ground, the trees, the sky. Each step was careful, like a man walking across thin ice. She followed him as best she could, refusing to let too much distance grow between them. As he rounded the far side of the wagon, he suddenly stopped. She froze behind him, his shoulders lifted slowly, stiff with alarm. He crouched and touched something on the ground. She leaned over just enough to see it. Another footprint. Closer than the last. Deep enough to show weight. He lifted his head, eyes narrowed, scanning the trees again. This time he didn't whisper. His voice was firm. They were here while we talked. She swallowed hard. How close? Close enough to hear every word. Her breath hitched, and she stepped closer to the wagon without thinking. He rose and positioned himself beside her again, one hand near the knife at his belt. The wind swept through the clearing. Colder than before, a crow cried out in the distance. He lowered his voice again. We cannot stay here long. Not with someone hiding this close. She looked up at him, scared but trusting. What do we do now? He faced the trees, his eyes sharp as a hawk's. We find them before they find you. Before she could respond. A new sound drifted out of the brush, a slow, deliberate step, not an animal, not a mistake. Someone was there. The sound of that slow step seemed to stretch across the space between the trees and the wagon. It was not loud, yet it carried a kind of weight that made her chest tighten. The shy Apache man shifted his stance, placing one foot a little ahead of the other, ready to move in whatever direction the danger came from. The gentle healer he had been moments ago was gone. In his place stood someone who knew how to face trouble on the old American frontier. Stay behind the wagon, he said quietly without looking back at her. His tone left no room for argument. She did as he asked, moving so the wooden frame was partly between her and the trees. Her bandaged hand gripped the edge of the wagon board, knuckles white. The wide land that once felt open and free now felt like a stage where someone unseen had been watching them both. Another step came, just to the right of the first one. No rush, no stumble, just a calm, measured sound. Whoever was out there was in no hurry. That scared her more than anything. Someone bold enough to move slow when two people were standing ready was not easily shaken. Show yourself, the Apache man called out. His voice was steady, but there was iron in it. No anger, just a warning. He stood tall, shoulders squared, his hand resting on the knife at his belt. The morning sun had risen higher now, casting light across his face. The shyness that once made him avoid her eyes was gone, replaced by a steady, sharp focus. At first there was no answer. Then a man stepped out from behind a thick tangle of brush. He wore worn trail clothes stained with dust and travel, a faded hat pulled low over his brows. His boots were scuffed, and he walked with the kind of loose confidence that came from too many miles on rough roads. A rifle hung from a strap on his shoulder, not raised, but close enough to reach if he wanted. Well now, the stranger said, glancing from the Apache man to the wagon and then to the woman peeking from behind it. I was starting to think you two might never notice me. His voice carried an easy drawl, but there was something in his eyes that felt sharp and restless. He looked at the woman a little too long before turning his gaze back to the Apache at her side. The Apache man did not move. How long have you been watching? He asked. Long enough, the stranger answered. Long enough to see a wagon break down, a woman trying to fix it alone, and a quiet Apache step out of the trees like some ghost from the hills. Long enough to see you hovering close. His words made her cheeks warm, and not only from embarrassment. There was a tone under his voice she did not like. It felt like he was trying to stir something, maybe suspicion, maybe trouble. You do not walk like a man who only passes through, the Apache man said. You follow tracks. You stay in the brush? You listen more than you speak. Why? The stranger smiled a little and spread his hands as if the question amused him. This is old American land out here, friend. A man learns that walking too loud can get him hurt. I'm just cautious, same as you. The Apache man's fingers tightened slightly on the knife handle. You were near her wagon last night. The stranger shrugged. Maybe I was. Maybe I was not. Maybe I just came looking for a trade this morning. Lonely wagon on a lonely road. Could be coins. Could be supplies. Could be someone who needs help. She stepped out from the wagon a little, though her heart pounded in her chest. If you wanted to trade, you could have called out, she said. You did not have to creep around in the dark. He tilted his head, looking at her fully now. Up close she could see his eyes better. They were a pale color, not cold but not kind either. The kind of eyes that always seemed to be measuring something. Or someone. Fair enough, he said. Maybe I should have. But you learn to be careful when you travel alone. Not everyone out here is friendly. That line sounded like something he had rehearsed many times before. Something he said whenever someone questioned him. It bothered her more than she wanted to admit. A man who always had an answer ready was hard to trust. The Apache man took a small step closer to her, a quiet motion that placed his body slightly ahead of hers again. If you wanted to talk, you would have come out when you saw me, he said to the stranger. Instead you waited. You listened from the shadows. The stranger's smile thinned. Maybe I was trying to see if you were the danger, he replied. An Apache and a lone woman? Sometimes trails cross in ways that end bad. The woman noticed the way the stranger's hand brushed near his rifle strap. Not grabbing, not yet, but close. Her stomach nodded. She also noticed the way the Apache man angled his body, not in open threat, but in quiet defense. As if he was ready to block any sudden move that came toward her. We do not want trouble, she said, trying to keep her voice calm. I just need to fix my wagon and get moving. If you are passing through, you can go your way and we will go ours. The stranger's gaze flicked to the wagon and lingered there. Where exactly is your way, Miss West? She answered carefully. Toward the towns beyond the ridge. His eyes narrowed slightly, as if that answer told him more than she intended. West meant new land, ranches, mines, places where settlers and old tribes clashed. Places where the border between peace and conflict was thin. You traveling to meet someone? He asked. Family, husband, a rancher waiting for you. His questions cut deeper than she wanted. The truth was, she had no husband waiting, no warm house, no set place to call home. Her travel across the frontier was a search as much as a journey. A search for a place where she might belong. She did not feel like sharing that with this stranger. I am just traveling, she said, and kept her answer short. The Apache man seemed to hear everything she did not say. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. You ask many questions for a man who says he only wants to trade, he told the stranger. The stranger smiled again, but this time it did not reach his eyes. Curiosity keeps a man alive, he said. Besides, I might be able to help. Broken wheel like that is a problem. Bandits ride these roads. You stay here too long and you might draw the wrong kind of attention. We already did. The Apache man said. The words hung in the air. Between them, the stranger's smile finally faded. Another sound echoed softly across the plains. Hooves, faint but steady. All three of them turned their heads at once. The woman felt her throat go dry. The stranger shifted his weight, eyes narrowing. The Apache man's fingers tightened on his knife again. Looks like I'm not the only one following tracks today. The stranger muttered. On the far edge of the rise. Dark shapes appeared against the lightning sky. Riders, at least 3, maybe more. They moved with an easy confidence, not rushing but not wandering either. They rode as if they knew exactly where they were going. Her heart hammered. Are they with you? She asked the stranger. He gave a small shake of his head. No, I travel alone. The Apache man did not take his eyes off the riders. They are coming straight toward us. The stranger adjusted his hat, his gaze sharpening. Could be ranch hands? Could be drifters? Could be worse. The woman's mind raced. She was caught now between a shy Apache who had stepped up to defend her, A stranger who had been watching her from the shadows, and a group of riders whose intent she could not read from this distance. The open land that once felt wide enough for anyone now felt too crowded and too small. We need a plan, she whispered. The Apache man glanced at her quickly, then back at the riders. Stay close to the wagon. Do not show fear. Let them show their hands first. And if their hands are on their guns, the stranger asked dryly. Then we see who shoots first, the Apache man replied. The woman flinched at the thought. She hated the idea of bloodshed. The old American frontier already had too many graves marked by rough stones and simple wooden crosses. She had passed them on lonely roads more times than she could count. Maybe there is another way, she said. Maybe they just want water or news. The Apache man did not argue with her hope, but he did not trust it either. He knew the stories, the fights, the broken promises between tribes and settlers. He had seen enough to know that not everyone on horseback came with good intentions. As the riders drew nearer, she studied the Apache man's profile. The low morning sun brushed his brow, his cheek, the line of his jaw. Under the quiet strength there was still a hint of that gentle, awkward soul who had blushed when she cried out in pain. She wondered what his life had been like before this moment. What family had shaped him? What losses had hardened him? Why a man who seemed so uncomfortable even touching her? Hand would now stand ready to put himself between her and danger. The riders came closer. She could see them more clearly now. Dusty coats, wide hats, saddlebags heavy with something she could not name. One of them wore a long coat that flapped in the wind. Another had a scarf over his mouth, hiding half his face. The third rode a little behind, scanning the land as if he was used to watching for ambush. The stranger, beside the trees, shifted, so his rifle strap was easier to reach. The Apache man took one slow, steady breath and stepped just enough ahead of the woman to shield more of her from view. Remember, he murmured to her, keep your eyes open. Watch their faces. The eyes tell more truth than words. The riders finally reined in their horses a short distance from the wagon. Dust swirled around hooves and boots. The horses snorted and pawed at the ground. For a moment no one spoke. The land went quiet again, holding that same heavy breath it seemed to carry all morning. Well now. The man in the long coat said, his eyes moving from the wagon to the Apache man and then to the stranger by the trees. Looks like we rode into an interesting little gathering. His tone was light, almost amused, but his eyes were hard and searching. He did not miss the tension in the Apache man's stance or the way the stranger's fingers hovered near his rifle strap. He saw the woman's bandaged hand and the broken wagon wheel in the same quick glance. You in some kind of trouble here. Miss? He asked. She opened her mouth, but the words would not come. She did not know whether to claim she was fine or admit she was afraid. She did not know if these men were saviors, threats, or something worse. Before she could find her voice, the Apache man spoke for her. We have what we need, he said. You can ride on? The man in the coat raised a brow. That's so. Funny thing. We heard different. Heard there was a wagon stuck on this road with something valuable inside. Heard someone might pay good money to know where it stopped. The woman's stomach twisted. The stranger by the trees stiffened. The Apache man's jaw clenched. Who told you that? The Apache man asked. The man in the coat smiled, a slow, knowing curve of his mouth. Someone who has been watching longer than you. The man in the long coat sat tall in his saddle, the brim of his hat casting a shadow that made it hard to read his expression. But his voice, calm and steady, carried a message none of them could miss. Someone who has been watching longer than you. The words seemed to pull the air tighter around them. The woman felt her pulse in her throat, her fingers gripping the wagon's edge while her mind tried to race through every possibility. She did not know who these riders were. She did not know the stranger by the trees. And she barely knew the shy Apache man who now stood like a shield in front of her. Yet she trusted him more than the others. The Apache man didn't move, but something in his stance grew sharper. His hand rested near his knife, though his expression stayed calm. Who sent you? He asked. The rider shrugged lightly. Folks who want something inside that wagon. Folks who pay good coin to know where a woman is heading. Folks who don't like surprises. She felt a tremor run through her. I don't have anything valuable, she said. Nothing worth chasing. The rider leaned forward a little, eyes narrowing. That depends on who you ask, miss. Sometimes the most valuable things aren't gold or silver. Sometimes it's information. Sometimes it's a person. The stranger near the trees shifted his weight. He looked uneasy now, and she couldn't tell if he feared the riders or feared being blamed for what was happening. He didn't speak, which only raised more questions in her mind. She didn't know if he was involved or just caught up in this mess like her. The Apache man spoke again, his voice steady. She is not going anywhere with you. The man in the coat let out a soft breath that sounded almost amused. Didn't say she was yet, but we're paid to collect what we find. And right now we find a wagon, a woman who travels alone, and two men who look like they might have something to hide. The Apache man didn't flinch. I hide nothing. The coat rider studied him quietly, as if measuring him against some memory. Apache, he said slowly, you folks know how to read the land better than most. Mind telling me what you see here? The Apache man replied without hesitation. I see men riding too confident for strangers. I see hands too close to their weapons. I see horses bred strong for long chases. And I see eyes that hold no good intentions. A low chuckle came from one of the other riders, the one with the scarf covering half his face. He liked that, I think, the rider in the coat said. That means he agrees with you. And when he agrees, things tend to get interesting. The woman took a small step closer to the Apache man, almost without thinking. His presence steadied her. Not because he was armed or strong, but because he had already proven he would not leave her. She felt safer near him than she had in years of traveling alone. The rider in the coat finally turned to her again. So tell me, miss, what exactly are you carrying that makes folks whisper your name around campfires? Why does your wagon draw attention? Her heart stuttered. I don't know what you mean. I have no gold. No maps, no secrets. The coat rider watched her face carefully. She could feel his gaze sliding over every detail, searching for some reaction, some falter in her voice. Maybe you don't, maybe you do. Or maybe someone else believes you do and wants us to bring you in. People lie. Trails lie. But footprints don't. The Apache man stepped forward slightly, his body still guarding her. Enough talking. Say what you want and leave. The rider's smile faded. What we want depends on what she knows. And what she knows depends on who she trusts. His gaze went to the stranger lurking near the trees. And I'm thinking she doesn't quite trust him yet. The stranger stiffened. Easy now, he muttered. I didn't do anything. You did enough by staying in the dark while she slept, the Apache man said sharply. The stranger's face tightened. I wasn't there to harm her. I was passing through. I was hungry. I saw the wagon and thought there might be food. Her head snapped toward him. So you did come close. He swallowed hard. Only to see if anyone was there. I didn't steal anything. You listened to us this morning, the Apache man said. You watched from the brush. And now these men show up asking questions you seem to already know too much about. The stranger took a step back, palms raised defensively. I didn't tell anyone anything. I swear it, she believed he was scared. But scared did not equal innocent. She couldn't tell yet. The rider in the coat shook his head slowly. That's the trouble with the frontier, miss. Too many folks pretending to be harmless until the moment they're not. The wind picked up again, brushing loose dust across the ground. The horses shifted restlessly, picking up on the growing tension. The Apache man leaned close enough for her to hear him whisper. When things get loud, stay low behind the wagon. She nodded, her heart pounding so hard she feared the riders might hear it. She could feel the moment tightening like a rope pulled between two stubborn hands. She wanted to speak, to ease the tension, to say something that might stop this from turning into violence. But her throat felt locked. The coat rider gestured lazily with his hand. All right, listen up. I want two things. 1, I want to know what you're carrying in that wagon. 2, I want to know who sent you west. No one sent me, she said firmly. And everything in the wagon is mine? Just tools and supplies. I'm just trying to travel. The rider studied her for a long moment. Then he sighed. I don't enjoy dragging people off the road. So let's keep this simple. Let us check the wagon. If we find nothing, we'll ride on. If we find something we weren't told about, well, then things get difficult. The Apache man spoke firmly. She said no. The rider shook his head. I wasn't asking her. I was telling her. The Apache man stepped forward, and the moment he did, the other riders shifted, hands inching closer to their guns. She felt the shift like a cold wave washing over her. The stranger near the trees looked trapped, as if torn between running and staying. She whispered, Please don't fight. But there was no stopping the spiral now. The man in the coat looked between them one last time, then clicked his tongue. I see we're going to do this the hard way. One of the riders reached for his rifle. The Apache man moved, pulling her behind the wagon in one smooth motion, his hand steady on her arm. Stay down, he whispered. Stay quiet, gun metal glinted. Horses snorted and stomped. Dust rose in the air. The stranger near the trees yelled something she couldn't fully hear. Maybe a warning. Maybe fear. Maybe guilt. Then a sharp noise cracked through the clearing. Not a gunshot, but the snap of dry branches from behind the riders. Every head turned. From the far side of the ridge, another figure stepped into view. Not riding, walking, a lone shadowed shape moving with slow, deliberate steps. The coat rider cursed under his breath. You again, the Apache man stiffened with surprise. You know him. The rider did not answer. Instead, he lifted his rifle half an inch, unsure whether to aim or wait. The lone figure stopped at the top of the ridge, the sun rising just enough to draw his shadow long across the ground. Even from a distance, the woman could see he held something in his hand. Something that glinted. Fear and curiosity fought inside her chest. The riders looked tense. The stranger looked confused. The Apache man looked ready. The lone figure lifted his arm, and the object glinted brighter in the sun. Finally, in a steady, low voice that carried across the plains, the unknown man called out a single sentence. She doesn't belong to any of you. Every rider froze. The Apache man breathed in sharply. The stranger took a step back, as she felt the world tilt. Knowing whatever came next would change everything. The lone man on the ridge stood with the sun rising behind him, making his shape look almost carved out of the morning light. His voice had rolled across the plains like thunder when he said, She doesn't belong to any of you. For a moment, no one moved. Even the wind seemed to stop. The Apache man still stood in front of her protectively, but his posture shifted. Not fear, recognition, as if something about the figure on the ridge connected to a part of his past he had not spoken of. The coat rider turned his horse slightly, angling himself to face both the ridge and the Apache man. That was not the voice of a stranger to him. There was frustration in the man's jaw, a kind of tight anger that showed he knew exactly who had appeared and did not like it. You followed us again, the coat rider said sharply. The man on the ridge began walking down toward them, slow and controlled, each step carrying calm confidence. You talk too much, the newcomer replied. And you assume too much. The woman is not your concern. As he came closer, she finally saw his face. He was older than the Apache man, but younger than the coat rider. His features were firm, steady, with a quiet strength that came from years of moving through the land with purpose. His clothes were simple, but well kept, and he carried no rifle, only a carving knife at his belt, the kind used more for shaping wood than fighting. Yet the riders watched him like he was dangerous. The Apache man's breath left him in a soft, surprised exhale. Brother, the word slipped from him quietly. Almost like a memory, he had not expected to speak aloud today. The woman's eyes widened. So the newcomer was not a stranger after all. Something eased inside her. If this was the Apache man's brother, maybe this would not end in violence. Maybe this was the shift they needed. The coat rider scowled. You were told to stay out of this. The brother shook his head. I do not take orders from men who hunt women over rumors. The rider pointed a stern look at the Apache man's brother. We were paid to track her down. Paid well? Someone wants her found. The woman felt a knot tighten in her chest again. Why would anyone want her followed or taken? She had no treasure, no hidden document, no reason for anyone to spend money searching for her. She looked at the Apache man's brother helplessly. Why would they want me? He stopped a few steps away and looked at her with eyes that held no judgment, only quiet understanding. Because someone spread a false word. Someone said you were carrying something important in your wagon. Something worth taking. That is why riders follow your tracks. That is why the stranger watched you. And that is why my brother stood guard. The stranger near the trees shook his head quickly. I didn't tell anyone anything. I swear it. The brother glanced at him only once. You did not need to. Others talk when they smell a chance at profit. False stories spread fast. Some men hunt without knowing what they hunt for. The coat rider shifted in his saddle. True or not, we were hired. And when a man takes a job out here, he finishes it. The brother stepped closer, stopping just short of the horses. Then finish it by telling the truth. She carries nothing. She is no threat. Let her go. The rider with the scarf gripped his reins, uneasy. The third rider looked away, clearly wishing he had never joined this job. Only the man in the long coat kept his expression firm. That depends, he said. There is still coin to collect if she goes west. The Apache man took a step forward, his voice steady. Then I will give you something better than coin. My word, you follow her no more. The coat rider scoffed at first, but something about the Apache man's steady expression made him hesitate. A man's word meant something on the frontier, especially from someone who stood firm even in fear. The brother folded his arms. And mine, you trouble her again, you trouble both of us. The riders glanced at one another. Two Apache brothers defending a lone woman was not the kind of trouble they wanted. The rider in the coat looked like he was doing a long bit of thinking in that moment. His jaw tightened. His knuckles whitened on the reins. But then he exhaled sharply and turned his horse a little. Fine, he said. But if the man who hired us comes looking, this won't end on us. He signaled his men. The riders turned one by one, some with relief, some with tension, but all ready to leave. The coat rider gave the woman a final long look. Whatever's in that wagon of yours, miss, you best hope it stays a secret. Then the horses moved, their hooves pounding softly across the plains as they disappeared over the far ridge. When the sound faded, the clearing fell into calm. The woman felt her muscles loosen, her breath returning. She had not realized how tightly she'd been holding the world inside her chest. The stranger near the trees walked forward slowly, hands raised. I didn't mean harm, he said. I was just passing through. She believed him now. He looked tired, worn down by too many hard nights and too little food. I didn't know people were looking for you. I thought you had food or tools I could trade for. I should not have snuck close. I am sorry, she nodded. It's all right. Just don't hide next time. The stranger gave a weak smile, then slung his bag over his shoulder and walked away down the trail. Leaving the three of them alone, the Apache man's brother turned to her. You have been carrying fear without knowing it. That is a heavy burden. She looked toward her wagon. There's nothing inside worth chasing. Only tools and blankets. Nothing else. The brother nodded. Then someone lied? But lies do not matter now. You are safe. The shy Apache man finally relaxed, his shoulders easing. His eyes softened as he looked at her, the hardened protector melting back into the gentle soul she first met. Are you hurt? He asked. She gave a small smile. No, thanks to you. The brother looked at his younger sibling with a quiet pride. You followed her tracks since dawn, didn't you? The Apache man lowered his gaze. She was alone. I was worried. The woman felt warmth spreading in her chest. She had traveled for years without belonging anywhere. But in the short hours she'd known him, this shy young man had cared for her safety more than anyone in a long time. The brother walked to her wagon, studying the broken wheel. This can be fixed, he said. I can help. The Apache man nodded. We can both help. Together the two men lifted the wagon, using a sturdy fallen branch as leverage. She held the wheel steady while they worked. The sky slowly brightened to full morning. Birds returned to the trees. The land felt lighter again, free of the tension that had gripped it. With teamwork and patience, the wheel was fixed stronger than before. When it was done, the Apache man wiped the dust from his hands and stood back. "You can travel again?" he said quietly. His voice held something gentle, almost hoping. She stepped closer to him. "I don't want to travel alone anymore." "Not today?" "Maybe not for some time." "Would you walk with me a while?" The shy Apache man's cheeks warmed just slightly, the same sweet flush she had seen when he helped her bandage her hand. "If you want," he said. His brother smiled. "I will join you until the next ridge. Then I go north. But the young one can stay as long as you need." They prepared the wagon together, tying down supplies and checking the harness. She climbed onto the seat, and the Apache man walked beside it, matching her pace with quiet steps. As they moved westward, the land stretched open again, but it no longer felt lonely. The tension had passed. The fear had fallen away. The mystery of why she had been followed was answered. And the danger was gone. She looked at the young Apache man walking at her side, the shy one who blushed when she cried out but stood fierce when danger came. He met her gaze briefly before looking down again, shy as ever. "Thank you for staying," she said softly. He gave a small nod. "I will stay as long as you want." The road ahead shimmered under the rising sun. The horizon felt wide and warm, full of promise. In the quiet of that morning, she felt something she had not felt in years. She felt safe, she felt hopeful, and for the first time in a long while, she felt she was not traveling toward something but with someone. Together they continued west across the old American land. Two souls who had crossed paths by chance, now walking forward toward brighter days, carrying trust and quiet companionship into the journey ahead.